What?
Okay, that's confusing. Okay. Phil, do you have an idea?
I would be in favor of discussing the possibilities of where we can continue on in the Conlang community and world.
In the Conlang world.
Yes.
Oh my. Yes. There is
And
one, in fact.
yes, there is. And I think presenting our languages could probably be the celebration themed event. So that is what I postulate.
Okay. Anna?
I'm in favor of discussing what kind of applications these Conlangs will have. And
Applications?
yeah,
You mean you want to actually be able to use this stuff in the real world?
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, that's a radical concept. Okay. Sure. Any other ideas? Me? Okay. So, from my vast and extemporaneous knowledge of conlanging, there's a few things. So, the conlanging world, as it were, consists of a few news groups, such as Brown, Conlang L, Augslang, for those people who practice the black arts. The Live Journal Conlangs community, there's a few others. There's a collection of websites, there's major ones, of which there are a dozen or two major websites that are well known. And there's many, many hundreds of small Conlang websites for each person's little Conlang where they present the information about it, and often other stuff. It's basically something just like any other news group. Oh, and there's alt language Conlang, I think, or alt language Artlang, alt-Augs, I forget what it's called. It's one of the news groups, news feeds, and there's several of those. Although, yeah, the Augslangers and the Conlangers, or the Artlangers, I should say, don't really get along very
Why?
well. Augslangers?
Yes.
In an attempt to be neutral about it, I'll say that Augslangers and Artlangers tend to have rather different goals and rather different worldviews of how it should go. Augslangers, for one, have the whole "we must appeal and our language will spread and take over the world," and very much like Yuri over here. And will take over the world and dominate civilization or whatnot. And then you get into arcane arguments, or not so arcane arguments, about whether it's appropriate for an Augslang to have both an R and an L, because, well, some speakers can't distinguish between the two, and Japanese speakers learning English have a very hard time trying to learn the difference. And, well, you know, you can reduce your set pretty quickly if you accept that premise.
Whoa, cool. I don't know I could do that.
So, yeah. So it's just much more pleasant when the two stay separated. Got to keep the colors separated, as Offspring would say. Application in the real world, there's been some jobs conlanging, mainly for books. There have been some people who have hired out conlangers to create conlangs for a book, or for a movie, or for something like that. That's happened. There are some research things that are based on conlangs, or mini conlangs, where, for various reasons, it depends on what exactly the researcher is trying to get at. Like if you're trying to test any Sapir-Whorf implications of a particular setup of language or whatnot, there's ways to go about it for that. And it's also useful as a language acquisition model to test various ways. So you can create conlangs with like slightly different things and see how easily they're acquired. It's not as easy to do that with a natural language because you don't usually have natural languages that vary minimally by a couple features, and then you can tell whether they're acquired differently or whatnot. That's pretty much the extent of what I know about those two. Do you have any other ideas? Any other ideas of how you could apply this stuff in the real world?
Conlangs?
Yeah, conlanging. Games. Oh, how?
Conlang by committee.
No, I didn't mean those kind of games. I meant RPGs, sort of like whoever that person was.
RPGs, yeah. Like I said, that's one.
And that's the only thing. It's totally useless for everything else.
Okay, that's one perspective.
Codes, secret codes, messages.
Codes, yeah, although cryptography is a much more developed field than this.
No, I mean, you can translate something into a conlang.
Yeah, but
Translate it
But you
down.
could actually take an actual cryptography
well,
course
yeah.
if you really wanted to.
Or you can create a bunch of conlangs
Well-
and say Monday's this conlang, Tuesday's this conlang, and then every day things are
you've got a
different.
one-time sheet of conlangs.
Yes.
It's essentially a human readable code. The idea is that as
Yeah.
opposed to having a completely arbitrary.
It's vulnerable to the same cryptographic
Yes.
attacks. Well, to the non-mathematical. Well, to some of them. It depends on the structure, obviously. But yeah, it's effective because it's just not worth the hassle.
Yeah.
But you don't really need a particularly developed conlang to be able to do that.
It's true.
You could start a fad.
A fad?
Yeah.
What kind of a fad?
Conlang one. And then,
I think they did that once. It was called like Zamenhof or Ranto? Yeah. Esperanto.
I think that was ever a fad, per se.
If you haven't read it, look up Ranto. It's an essay about all the interesting, shall we say, the quirks of Esperanto. Yes. You were saying?
Well, I wasn't saying anything.
You were about
It's
a
a
fad.
figment of your imagination.
Oh, that would be so nice.
Flash.
If only. No. Okay, so there's that. I don't know. What do you want to do with your conlangs? Or for that matter, do you care about the conlang itself, or do you what?
No, we're here for the credits.
Or
You're obviously not. I think you're here for either half for the argument and probably half for the argument ability and half for the class itself.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, figures.
Maybe 40% class, 60% argument.
Okay.
case in point.
I figure if I'm getting auditors to a decal, I can't be doing too bad. You're actually taking it for credits, even though your university is counting a pass as a C.
Mm-hmm. Wait, someone's counting a pass as a C?
Yeah, he's an international student.
You
Where
count
are you
passes?
from? Barcelona University?
No, Barcelona University.
Which?
It doesn't have a name in English. It's called.
Okay, what's it called in Spanish?
Spelled
Yeah, in
better.
EAP they translate it as Autonomous University of Barcelona, but it's not even in Barcelona. So
EAP?
in EAP for EAP purposes, it's called.
Oh, Education Abroad Program.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's called the Autonomous University of Barcelona.
Okay, what's it called in Spanish?
Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona.
That's a pretty close translation.
Yeah, but I mean that's not really the name. It's just.
What is the name? If you were in Spain and someone asked you, what school do you go to? You'd say that?
Yeah.
But how is it not the name?
but not
N+2
but not the name in English. In English, that's not the name. Just That's just how you call it here. But
What do you mean, not the name?
because universities are usually called from by the place you're from, but in Barcelona there are many universities, so you can't do that. There is one University of Barcelona, but that's only one of the many there are. So
Okay, how do you tell that you're going to this one and not some other one? Are they all called the same thing?
no.
So what is yours called?
So then,
Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona.
then how is that not its name?
The English version is not the name.
We've
Not even the
always
Spanish
done.
version because it's actually in Catalan. So
Okay, what's the Catalan version?
the Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona.
Oh, so you changed the date to da.
That's not how it works.
I think it's still its name, sorry. It's close enough. University of California, Berkeley, Universidad de California in Berkeley.
In Berkeley.
And Berkeley, yeah. That's probably what it's called, right? It's the
So
same.
a pass is a C?
It's still its name. Evidently, because they don't have pass-fail. They don't have pass-no-pass grades. They just have grade.
Yeah.
So why did they say it is the C all of a sudden? I mean, that sounds like...
Because they're very pessimistic.
Because it's a pass, which means you must have just passed the class, and they don't assume anything more than that. So a C it is.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, I think so.
Why are you taking this class again?
I need the credits.
Luce is honest. Sure. So, what do you want to do with the skills you've developed in this class, or
Skills in this
used?
class?
What? Other than argumenting and basketball, obviously.
I wouldn't say that his basketball skills have really developed.
No, not really.
You can
Fancy.
go around yelling in your language. Don't point the thing at me. And then people won't think you're insane, but you'll actually have something to prove that you're not.
You will?
Conlang, you can show them your
But it'll
document.
all be in the language.
Yeah.
So they'll still think you're insane.
You can provide an English translation.
What if the people don't speak English?
You can provide a native language translation.
Okay, well, walking around like a schizophrenic is, I'm sure, one possible
Have you
advantage.
heard about that that I eat glass thing?
The who?
The I eat glass thing?
Yes.
Okay.
I can eat glass, it does not hurt me. Yes. I'm well aware of this. Having Discordian friends, yes, I'm well aware of this. Okay. So, Anna, you're still working on your language, presumably.
Yes.
Do you intend to continue it? Do you intend to work it out? Do you intend to just borrow the ideas or drop it entirely, or what? What are you going to do with what you've put into it?
I might actually try to translate the Babel text entirely this summer.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit difficult with finals this time to actually do the final project, but I'm interested in it. I like it still. It's just,
Well, what do you want to do with it after that?
what do I want to do with it after
Yeah.
that? It was kind of just a fun experiment to try. So, I mean, it never really was meant to have any application. So,
Sure. But
yeah.
do you figure you'll continue conlanging or no? Is this just sort of
Maybe not
one
with
of
this
those
one.
experimental things you did in college?
Maybe not with
and
this
Clink?
one. I don't know if I'd continue conlanging with the one I currently have, but maybe some other one someday.
Maybe other...
I didn't hate the class, if that's what you're trying to get at.
No, it's just, I don't expect everyone to become a real-life conlanger, you know.
It's a trademark now.
Oops.
There are real life conlangers?
Yeah,
Are they professional conlangers? Do they keep
there
paid?
are some professional conlangers.
Do they get paid?
Yes.
We were just talking
Sometimes,
about
yes.
Well, with your
Um,
RPGs and games.
I believe the
Consulting.
creator of Klingon gets paid by,
Which creator?
what's his
Which
name?
creator?
Well, there's the guy who wrote gibberish
Mark
that had no
Oakland.
meaning.
There's a chance that he's watching this.
Wait, get a what?
Mark Oakland.
Yeah.
Or Oakland.
He gets paid?
I don't know, but I presume so, since the intellectual property on that is
belongs to the
Wasn't
movie
it like
studio.
Gene Roddenberry that created that whole Star Trek thing?
Yeah, but he
created
gets his
Star
cut.
Trek, yes, but he did. So it's a question of intellectual property rights, and basically, I think Miramax or whoever it is, who is it that owns Star Trek?
I have no clue.
I don't know. So someone owns Star Trek and all the associated trade dress. Paramount. Yeah.
Definitely.
So they own Star Trek. They own everything Star Trek related. You want to use their names in anything commercial, you gotta pay. But on the other hand, Mark Okrand wrote the language, technically
Was
speaking.
he hired to write it?
Yeah,
No, he did it of his own accord.
Okay, and so are they,
as
are
far
they
as I
using
know.
that language?
And as far as I know now, they're actually using it. So
Wow.
one could make a case either way, I think, for who has the intellectual property on that and whether they owe him royalties. I honestly don't know, but I could see it possibly being done. Yeah, there aren't people there aren't, as far as I know, anyone who survives just on calling. If you do, please tell me. I'd like to meet you.
Would they like
but
to
I
meet
don't
you?
believe that you exist. Sorry. Yeah, there's, and there have been people who publish books on Conlang. Very few. Sally Caves, I believe, as she's known on Conlang L, although that's not her real name, because in her real life she's actually, I think, a language-related teacher. I'm not going to go into details. Somewhere.
What's her real name?
Ask her. I happen to know, but if you're interested, you'll have to ask. She goes by pen name for reasons, obviously, and she's done published work both under her actual name and under her pen name. She's like a real linguist and all that shit.
So if you have a pen name and publish something on that pen name, are there any legal loopholes you have to jump through?
What do you mean?
Can you just publish something under someone's name?
Well, you can't. Oh, okay. So that's.
As in, can I publish something under Sai's name?
No. See, that essentially is a question of what name you're allowed to change what you're allowed to use as your own name. So it's under California common law, at least, you can effectively assume any name that you want just by using it, and it becomes your legal name through use. It's there's a difference between a common law name and a court mandated name change, which is what you have to do normally. And obviously the court one is more powerful, but there are restrictions on what you're allowed to change your name to. You're not allowed to change your name to something that has, basically into something that has trade dress associated with it, or that has where you could say that you were taking advantage of the established name. Like you couldn't change your name to Madonna. Why? Because she's an established figure.
Can you change your name to fuck you?
Yeah. If
That taking advantage of an established.
If the judge allowed you, I think there are some limits on things like that, but unless you could show that it was trying to take advantage of someone, or it was liable to do damage to someone, or something like that, then yeah, you can change your name to more or less anything you damn well please. Prince changed his name into a symbol. You can name your kids anything you damn well want.
Wait, a symbol?
Yeah.
You don't
symbol.
know about Prince?
Like
Kids.
something like
The artist formerly known as Prince.
Yeah.
It's much easier to say.
What is
than-
this symbol?
It's a weird looking.
It's all visual.
symbol.
It's entirely visual.
It's just a symbol. It's not.
So how do you write that legally?
He writes it.
You write it.
Yes, but it's not a letter of the English alphabet.
It's not
You
relevant.
don't- you don't
have
type
to
it.
name yourself in a way that's writable in the English alphabet. Nothing says that you do.
And how do you...
You don't have to
Puts his own
name your
logo.
kids the same thing as your last name. You can name them
No,
totally
how do you,
arbitrarily.
like, for example,
You don't have to give them a last name even.
how would you fill out an official document then? Say an online form where you have to.
Well, that's a pragmatics question. That makes it more difficult, obviously.
So what about when they say? What about when they say
names.
on the form, like for official form, please print in English only?
Yeah, that's a question of pragmatics.
That's not pragmatics. They tell you to print it in English
that's
only.
filling out forms. That's not legal.
That's not referring to when you're naming the child, which
No, I'm not talking
it's
about
not
that.
relevant.
I'm talking about when you have a name that's not in the English.
That's just
then
not
you have a
relevant.
nickname.
Just because it doesn't fit in the form doesn't mean you can't legally do it.
Okay,
There's many things that don't fit on forms that you can still do.
So how would you do you have to call them up and say?
Obviously, it would be more difficult. Or you can have an alias that's writable in English. That's much more.
Can you change your name to nothing?
No, you cannot change your name to nothing. However, there was a court case where it was in fact decided that you can change your name to something that you don't know. There was a woman, I think this is in New York, who wanted to change her name for some reason, and for some reason she didn't want to know what it was being changed to. So there was an appeals process about this, and it was ruled that yes, what would happen was the judge would choose a name for her. This name would be held secret since it is confidential to her, obviously. Her name is confidential information. It cannot be released, except for in certain cases, obviously. But she didn't want to know it. And that's what happened. The name became confidential to her in the court, and that's it.
Was it on any legal documents written down?
Presumably on the name change form, but that's all it needs to go on. I don't know if she had an alias in addition to it. I don't know anything else about the case except that I read this online.
I think this is a result of some dare or something.
That's a pretty far-reaching dare.
I don't know. I don't think you can name yourself to nothing. You need a name.
Yeah, your name is.
Nothing.
Your name is blank blank. I don't think that would fly.
It's a very lightly drawn underscore.
I don't think that would work.
So whenever you have an uncomfortable silence, they're calling your name?
Yeah, Washington. Or is it Pink Elephant now? I don't remember.
Pink Elephant.
Pink Elephant?
Someone would tell me?
There's various, whenever there is an uncomfortable silence, someone thinks of, and then fill in the blank. And you can make people think about weird things by doing this. It's a nice little seed to plant. Or samskara, as they would say in meditation class.
Yeah.
That's okay. So how did we get into names? It's your fault, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. At least we know whom to blame.
Conlangs, and what we're going to do with them?
Yeah.
Yeah, at least I'm bringing it back on topic.
Good. Philip, what do you think? What are you going to do with your mighty experience?
Did you even start?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yes, Punk. So, I was...
Sure with your imagination?
Would you like me to point the camera back at you?
Do you want to take this outside?
An innocent bystander caught on tape. I was thinking about, in terms of the current conlang that I'm working on, is I'll probably continue fleshing out the con culture and the vocabulary for a bit more. But I'm probably not gonna fully fledge it. I'll settle it, I'll sort of learn something from it, and it's just sort of like, your first delve into whatever you're doing.
Will you do another?
Presumably, I think so. Yeah. I've been looking at conlanging for a while on and off. Like the language constructor kit was probably the most useful one I found a long time ago, and
it's your basic starter kit.
exactly. Yeah, now that I actually have some more hands-on experience with it, I can go back and it's sort of like you read the instructions ahead of time, and then you do it. And so this was reading the instructions and give it a shot.
Worth the effort on the trial version?
Definitely. I mean,
What do you think you would take away from it? Like, okay, so you leave the trial version and you don't really use it or anything, so it gathers dust. but
No,
presumably,
trophy.
well,
Somewhere.
it gathers pixels. Probably not that, because you'd have to read it for that. So, but obviously there's some long-term impact, one hopes. What would that be?
I guess.
Or what interests you?
Hmm?
What interests you? What would continue?
Well, I would definitely, it sort of gave me a better taste of figuring out the justification for my decisions and why I went down different paths and why a culture would go down those paths.
Because I chose the other way this one time, and look how bad it turned out.
Yes. So, I mean, there was definitely that, but also, I have a lot more experience now with, dealing with the actual phonics and the little itty-bitty sounds that make up the language, which I really had no idea how to approach before, and now I still have no idea how to approach, but, I mean, I have...
Now you can not approach him with passion.
Yes.
And you can always take a phonetics and phonology class
Probably.
here at Berkeley.
I mean, that is, of course, an option.
If you
Or not.
really want to know way more than you could ever possibly tolerate about sound. No offense to the phonologists in the audience.
But you suck!
Yeah, sorry. I'm not bored of you.
Maybe we heard that.
I'm
bit.
sure it's obvious by now. Samuel, what about you? I know you were doing it because it builds into your world building.
Mm-hmm.
Are you actually using that for anything other than a personal project? Are you going to write something on it, or is this just, or is it for an RPG? Or I know you were doing it, but I'm not sure why.
This is for a story I've been thinking about for years, for almost half my life. And some time ago I invented this tribe that didn't exist before, and when I learned about this course I thought it would be interesting to make their language. And that's what happened. And sometimes I think it's worth it, and sometimes I think it's not.
Okay, so how is it worth it, how is it not?
Sometimes I think it's worth it because it helps me decide how they think, because I think there is an important relationship between how people think and the language they have. And sometimes I think it's...
Did you read the Tolkien article?
I hate Tolkien.
Oh. Them's fighting words. I'm gonna let that pass.
Hey, I thought you didn't like him much either.
I'm down with Tolkien. I'm not a rabid fan, but it's all good.
I am no longer a rabid fan, so it's all okay.
In any case, you
Anyway,
said that on video and about several hundred...
No flame mail, please. That's all.
Or releasing
Tolkien
Yuri's.
fans are going to chase
Really,
after
I
you
tried to read the
with
book, but
swords.
sorry, it's just
And
not
stabs.
No,
possible.
I meant the article that he wrote where he basically argued that you had to have con culture to be able to make a decent language, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. But sometimes I think it's just a waste of time because no one is going to use this language, and really.
Angst.
This is true, yes.
So I don't know.
Well, is anyone going to use your culture?
If I finally write the book, maybe.
Is this for a novel that you're thinking of? or
Yeah.
what? Okay, that's good. Who uses Quenya? Who uses
People
Middle
do.
Earth?
People
A lot
do.
of people do.
I think it's the same thing, really. It's not likely to get used.
Well, no, people know what Quenya is and people do use it.
Yeah, but that's okay. Yeah, but it's not.
Hey, I use it in my passwords.
You too?
Yeah.
Good to know.
Don't worry, you won't guess it.
Why do you put in lead?
Not exactly,
No.
but close enough.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the fine line.
Oh yeah.
What would you take away from this then? Even if you say, if you
It's very
do
secure.
create a language, or what do you want to do with it? If if you do create a language, if you don't, do you care about the language itself, or is it just a tool for thinking of your
Both
culture?
things. I do care about the language because I love linguistics, and at the same time I'm doing it also for the culture. So.
Do you think it's helping improve that, or was it worth it? I don't know.
Yeah. At least it made me think about things I hadn't thought about before. So.
Like cultural contact, and what tribes do when they're young, and what jobs are assigned.
Maybe.
Did I miss something?
Yeah, possibly. This was a couple of months ago, I think. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Hopefully, and I'm sure you'll share your book with us if you ever write it.
Okay.
One hopes.
And no thanks to.
What?
There's a
It's traditional to give credits, and he's suggesting anti-credits.
Oh.
For the book. This book written despite the efforts of my friends and family. Yuri, what about you?
Yes, I have a Conlang and actually like it. And
You do?
yes.
So
When did this happen?
I'm not absolutely sure. It seemed like you came to the class with ideas about it.
Yeah.
So how did that work exactly?
I lost most of those ideas and got new ones in the process. But anyway, so
Aw.
everything in my Conlang can probably, well, actually does fit here in this 128 meg. In fact,
Is it on there?
yes.
Here.
It's entirely possible that everybody's Conlang could fit on that. Like everyone's all together.
Ah, you have a PDA. Of course. It'll be under Conlang.
Wow.
Okay, so continue while he's fiddling.
Keep talking.
And so yeah, I'll probably continue it at some point. Oh, you have a 512 one. How sweet, I'll trade you.
So you don't care for your conlang at all.
Yes, but this is 512.
The truth comes out.
So easily sold. A couple
Should be under
hundred
Conlang.
megabytes of storage space, and that's what your Conlang is worth.
Not just a couple hundred. Well, yeah, a few hundred. Anyway, yeah. So I'll continue doing that. At some point, I'll finish it when I have time. And yeah, that's.
What do you like about it? Why are you doing it?
It's coming together sort of elegantly, and you may want to use it at some point.
What about it do you like? People like different things about their Conlangs or about Conlangs.
I like how it's semi-logical. It's got those binding forms, and that sort of allows you to have flexibility in words, sort of like our Conlang by committee. Each word didn't. You stole that from me, didn't you, you bastards? Anyway.
No, not really.
So it allows any word to function as anything. So I kind of like that.
I actually like how that particular feature of Agile turned out. I think that was the most productive one, part of that discussion for me. It's an idea that I can steal and use elsewhere. So,
What SD card?
what's on the card?
A number of text documents and an item
Which-
labeled word generator, which probably is the infamous
Which take up 200 megs of space.
No, it's
No.
not finished. It's a PI document.
bytes, 3K, 1, and so I would say about under 5K.
So it's terribly necessary to
It's a first draft. It's not complete.
Do you really expect
Okay.
to have a 200 megabyte file draft?
Well, if his vocabulary generator runs overnight.
My vocab generator is, yeah, it's in
Is your
Python.
No, I
vocabulary
don't have a
generator
Python.
capable
Probably
of
not on the
using
PDA, I'm
glosses as
guessing.
well, not just...
Why's your
Target
screen
words.
so beat up?
Because I haven't replaced the cover in a while.
Actually, it would be interesting how you could... Ooh. Huh.
So
I wonder
I'm
if you could
thinking
do
of
that.
grammar, which is quite a bit actually.
Actually, I think you probably could build a stochastic
Do
Petri
you
map.
want to do final class?
Cogs.
So
Isn't this the final class?
No.
I'm thinking of how to create
Uh,
glosses and words and translations and metonymous and metaphorous extensions thereof using a Bayesnet.
A Bayesnet?
A Bayesnet for drawing and
What's it called? Is it Bayes?
Yes, Bayes after the guy who.
Oh, okay.
Bayesian inference
Sounds
after the
familiar.
Bayes theorem
Sounds
of
familiar.
probability P of A given B is equal to P
Oh,
of...
this is just true false, right?
No.
No, okay.
Well, possibly, but I mean the base. No,
Okay.
no,
I'm
it's
thinking
not.
about something else.
Has to
You
do with the
have
doors
a-
problem.
The doors problem.
I hear that it's a popular discrete
suppose
math problem.
you
It's
can
like you
run
open,
compile the things.
Oh,
have three
no.
doors. No,
No.
Don't
Well,
have an interpreter.
you're given
actually,
one.
yeah. No, you can do it that way. You can
No, I
run.
think
You
I'll have
are you
to
curious?
I'll ask after class.
Okay.
It's not on topic.
Yeah. No, it's not at all. But we've wandered into quantum mechanics before. Why not Bayes? Bayes.
What
I think
Yeah.
quantum mechanics are a little bit more culturally appealing than statistics.
It. But it's like neural networks and
Quantum mechanics is different.
yeah.
Where's the battery last on this?
Actually, Yuri, yo,
That's it? Yo.
If I'm running everything.
and Philip,
Oh, you got NetHacks. Sweet.
Yes, I do.
if I can draw you away from the net hack for a bit.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Guess that
Now-
counts for a bit.
You two being the other major CS geeks around here, can you think of a good way to create an entire vocabulary automatically? Not just the target words, that's easy enough by
Oh, with the gloss as well?
Yeah, the gloss as well in a realistic manner and one that takes advantage of metonymies and whatnot.
I mean, if you had something a little bit more complicated than just a dictionary that sort of mapped out more rudimentary meanings in a source language that you were essentially sort of deriving from, then you could begin by arbitrarily assigning certain of the target words to the base string meanings, and then you would have a form of mutation that would take those base string meanings and essentially in the way that the web
You'd
branches.
copy. It's
With allowing for mutation, you would take a randomized seed from the target language and use the web sort of interconnection and like synonyms and such. They essentially the gloss from the other
Screen's
language.
really bad on
Yeah,
here.
but the thing is, that varies hugely from language to language, and the question is not how would you replicate it in another language. That's relatively easy.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, it's non-trivial, as the physicists would say.
Well, I would say you could
It's
derive your own
relatively easy.
unique. I mean, like, if you wanted, you could, as opposed to using the seeds from another language, you could provide your own. But essentially, you would start off by assigning some of the more culturally fundamental concepts in there, and then you'd branch out by modifying what you have, or doing. I mean, it depends on the style of the
Do you
language.
think it could be done automatically? Like, how much do you think it would have to require human programming?
I would say that you could make something that might fool a human at decent glance, but I think you wouldn't get the same level of depth currently with our modeling capabilities, because literally the mutations that you perform, I think, have connotations and sort of mental effects when
Like what?
literally, like, you have associations with sounds and words and such, I would say.
An aesthetic?
Hmm?
An aesthetic?
I think so, yes. And you would have to, like, model those, you'd have to, I mean,
But it's argued that those are cultural anyway.
well, yeah, but then, I mean, you can make it completely arbitrary, I guess.
I guess the question is, could you make some algorithm that, given its algorithm and given its database or whatever, was capable of creating a complete dictionary vocabulary that could pass as a entirely plausible foreign language dictionary with entirely plausible glosses and multiple meanings and many to many and whatnot that a real language would have?
I think it's still arguable that you need a source domain of, quote, reality, because, I mean,
Sure.
any language, I mean, like, you have to derive the relations and the
Yeah.
meanings from something. And consequently, if you're not allowed to use the already interpreted data from another language, that would be like information.
Well, that's database. You can.
Well, then the database is still language specific. I mean, you would essentially
You
need
can have
to
multiple databases.
find. Well, then you'd have an amalgamation of different databases. I mean, then what I was saying earlier would have been equally valid.
You don't think you could break out of that?
Well, the only way to truly break out of it would be to add sensory apparatus and give it some sort of priorities on along what axes to, like, we choose vision strongly, but we still like are very sensitive to like extreme heat, extreme cold and stuff, and like some of the finer stuff like texture, our language eventually captures, but it's less so. I would say it's much more subtle.
Yeah.
You notice like bright things more distinctly, and so
You don't have a knowledge is roughness metaphor.
Yeah.
Like that.
so I mean like
Knowledge
you
is seeing.
yeah. So you would have to draw from the source domain of reality through some sort of
How do you drop stuff?
depends on to where.
Just drop it on the ground.
You use the same text commands that you use on the.
Yes, but I can't get a listing of my inventory with like little letters telling me what's what.
I forget what the command is. I haven't played NetHack in a few weeks.
I can't remember.
Okay, good. Although I think the menu options let you do a lot of this stuff. But I mean, like, you wouldn't necessarily have to have the program that is generating the vocabulary to be the sensory apparatus as well. I mean, this would be a great example where you'd want something distributed, some sort of distributed data mining and sensing mechanism that would derive its own database from nature or from some sort of arbitrary sources. I mean, that would probably be the most natural source
Do you think it's doable?
for meaning.
Practically.
I think
Within our lifetimes.
Yes, I think within our lifetimes, you definitely need sort of a dedicated team effort, and I'd probably give them like a decade or so. But, I mean, no, the problem is setting up the infrastructure for the data mining would be the most difficult part. Once you have the infrastructure in place, you just need to let that sit for a while.
Actually, I think that's being done. There are analogous projects that are actually already being done in
I know the ones where like they're trying to
FrameNet, for example.
Yeah, I think, and like where essentially you're trying to find all the connotations and like the expand
FrameNet,
mounts.
CogNet.
Yes, of the English language essentially.
Mainly English, because guess who makes the money to
Yes.
fund the projects?
So,
Yes, it's almost all in English. Not all, but most.
yeah. So I mean, like that's the sort of web you'd want to end up with.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's
But
sort of
you
going
need
in
to
the
be able to
opposite direction.
generalize that, obviously. You couldn't just say,
Ooh, a scroll label.
well, you could make sort of
Yeah.
I remember
a hard-coded data link
Yeah, that's right.
between, say, spirit as in like ghosts and soul, and ghost and soul could be hard-coded together, for example, and spirit as an alcohol.
Mhm.
And you could just say these concepts are related. Why? Well, they're related. But
They're wispy.
you'd want to generalize that. You'd want to
Yeah.
have some way of some algorithm that
So you're
would
thinking-
predict
you're-
what concepts are related.
You're thinking,
And that's much harder, I think.
as opposed to getting raw data, take, for example, the FrameNet, and see if you can find the underlying concept structure. That
Not just that, but create the underlying concept structure. Like,
Okay.
why do we associate certain words? Some of them are random because they're like from different languages and they just happen to sound sort of similar and they just got lumped together into the same word. Some of them are related because they have similar use, or one occurs with the other, or they're sort of vaguely semantically related through some other concept. But I don't know of any work done that would be able to predict arbitrarily or create arbitrarily what relationships exist of that sort in an arbitrary language.
That's true. I mean, I was just gonna say, like, just finding the meaning behind the English underlying
Magic
concept
protected.
structure. I mean, like, the knowledge required for comprehending the entire structure is distributed across millions of people and generations. I mean, like,
Yeah.
it isn't like you can just, like, find that. I mean,
No,
you
you
literally
can't.
have to say, like, anyone know the answer to this question, to this question, to this question? And then it's like, man.
Damn, lousy goblins.
Yeah, but then that's again a question of generalizing. Can it be done? I don't know. I wonder. I think it's an interesting question, and while it would make for a good vocabulary generator, maybe for conlangers, I think it's a more interesting question of philosophy and
Yeah.
cognitive science and linguistics in general.
I mean, like, if you were going for, like, a conlang that was trying to be naturalistic, you'd probably want to settle for a very good bridge, but still a bridge nevertheless from an existing vocabulary.
Yeah, or you could hand code it, of course. Or I think what you'd probably end up having is having some sort of database of existing connections and both randomizing within it and having some sort of hand tweaking of adding new connections, adding new metaphors, and seeing how they propagate into the thing. Like, for example, what if you added a fundamental metaphor of not down is good, not up is good, but down is good, and you just switch that and you let it propagate through the net?
Yeah.
Then what would happen? I think it would be interesting. I don't think it's been done. And I think that would be one way of breaking out of the problem you'd have with just data mining, where you'd be limited to the range reachable from the present set.
You'd still want some sort of target domain, which would be a culture, presumably, that you figured out yourself. Because, I mean, there's essentially those are the basic principles that are the axes that you work off of.
I guess that extends to the question of, can you come up with basic principles? Is it possible, other than through intuition or experience, to come up with new ideas, like totally fundamentally new ideas? Is that even possible? Like, for example, let's say you'd never thought of the concept of timelessness or of nonlinearity of time. Like, we've all probably been exposed to the Eastern meditation stuff. That's probably where we got it, or where the people we got it from, or somewhere along the line. But how would you come up with that, or how would you come up with the next iteration of that, or something like that? I don't know. I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah, no, we just had a debate in our intro to concept class. It was just the classic, like, is it physically possible to create a machine not that thinks, but mimics human thinking and understanding?
Was this the Chinese room argument?
No, way beyond that.
Okay.
Or more general than that, I would say. It was like, the interesting thing is that most people agreed that machines could be programmed to think to a certain extent and to develop their own experiences.
For some value.
It's supposed to be small hail today.
But it did for a while. People were arguing, we were actually split about 50-50 about whether human in particular thinking could be replicated, because, I mean, I think the argument that came down to was like, a lot of what makes you distinctly you is the fact that you have a life that you've experienced for the past N years. And I mean, like,
couldn't a machine replicate that?
Well, a machine could have N machine years of life, and it would have a machine life. And
haven't you seen Blade Runner?
Yes,
Yeah.
But
and for that matter, can we replicate machine thinking?
in our heads.
Yes.
How come we're not asking that? Are we not good enough?
I can.
Some.
Maybe.
I can assemble in my head a little bit.
Do assembly in your head.
What a wonderful skill.
NES assembly.
So, yeah, I mean, the fact was like that the human experience, that's a lot of data and stuff that is very difficult to capture in all its nuances. And so that was like
I think it's like
an interesting point.
I think the sensory data itself is something on the order of petabytes per day.
Yeah.
Just raw data. It obviously it gets hugely filtered. But I think, for example, your eyes take in about 0.5 terabyte per second, or is it per minute?
Yeah, but you don't remember any of that.
Yeah, no, you don't really experience it. It's 120 million pixels, or is it 240? 240 million pixels. I think that's what it was, something like that. In both of your eyes, and that's obviously at around 32 frames per second, as it were.
Conveniently, yes.
So that's a lot of data, and that's just visual, and obviously you have your proprioceptive and your
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not to mention your internal data. Do you have any ideas of
What the hell is
how to
this?
develop Conlang into an amazing
What is that?
new frontier, going where no Conlang has ever gone before?
What?
I'm being somewhat facetious, but no.
It's got subtitles.
What do you mean?
Yes, of course, it's Japanese.
Well, like what we've been discussing just now, how you could make a machine
Is it the length?
create
Yes.
ideas.
What I was
How big
thinking
is
is
it?
that there's not just
200?
one human way of thinking. Every person thinks differently.
Sure.
And it depends on your experiences, on your culture, and
Yeah,
on
sure.
many other things.
Yes, yes,
So you
yes,
can't
yes,
create
yes.
the human way of thinking.
Why not?
To
You could
create
ma-
one of
You
the...
could generalize that. Why couldn't
It's
you?
a standard headphone jack.
Given these experiences, humans will think like this. Given these other experiences,
Yeah.
they will...
Why couldn't you generalize over the set?
But there's also... I think when you are born, there are already some parameters set.
Okay.
Like, people with the same experiences react differently. Right?
Depending. I mean, it depends just how nitpicky you get about experiences.
Why do some people find some things boring and other people find other things exciting?
That
I-
depends.
I
That
think-
depends what psychologist you ask.
I think that's more than experience. I think that's you are just born with some parameters that make you like some things and dislike other things. Maybe.
But again, you could argue that that's all experience. I mean, even if you really wanted to, you could have it go back to the experience of your DNA bonding,
No, I wouldn't say that. I
or
wouldn't
the
maybe
experience
say.
of chemicals being received while you're in the womb. Or
I
whatnot.
I wouldn't quite label that as experience because I think experience usually is sort
Sensory experience.
of is something that that you're processing and interpreting. But I mean, like what you could
Depends what
say.
you call processing. I mean, that's an unsolved question.
Oh, quiet.
No, really, it is.
I know. But what I would point out is like maybe not experience per se, but you can argue that I mean the genetic material that you inherit and such has been influenced over the course of its life and as it's been passed down
Yeah.
and such. And so
Do you think you could generalize human thinking? Or create any, or more specifically, could you create an algorithm that is capable of creating an arbitrary human thinking?
essentially an infant that develops into a human.
Oh, or is created mid-life cycle, but whatever. Yeah, essentially. Could you could you have something that is capable of generating some instance of a human's way of thinking? Like he said, we all think differently, but could we be created? Could our thought process be created? Predicted?
Thoughts?
Do you think if another person had exactly the same experiences that you have had, would be the same that you are now?
Not relevant. No, like, if you're generalizing it, you can generalize for initialization variables, as you would call them.
What do you mean?
They get both channels.
Well, you
in
said
by
people
both
start
the
differently, right? You can control for that also. You can create various starting conditions. Why not?
That's what I was saying. There are many possible starting.
Yeah, sure.
So there is not just one. So
I didn't say there was just one.
Okay.
I said, could
It's
you give an arbitrary one?
a
by
framework
an
that you could then
algorithm?
you would have variables within it for the starting
Yeah.
conditions.
if you are able to list all the possible experiences a human can have, and all the possible reactions a human will have to them.
That's the idea. It's an interesting question.
If you can list all of those and put them in a database.
I don't think it would be databaseable. You'd have to have an
What?
algorithm for it.
What?
You'd have to have an algorithm for it.
Oh, as
there's
opposed to
there's an infinite. There's probably an
Yeah.
infinite number. I mean, no. Certainly, there's an infinite number if simply because of like spatial.
yes, configurations.
Yeah, it's obviously infinite, but I think it's not as easily dismissed as a question of could it be created by algorithm. Could an algorithm model any arbitrary human experience, or for that
Yes.
matter, could our algorithm
It's been done.
map like
maybe it wouldn't be able to search the entire state space of possible human experiences, but it could access the entire search space, which is a very different thing CS-wise, and it's still a workable thing depending on what your approach is. There are more simple, hardcore stuff where the state space is entirely too large to actually search sequentially or iteratively. You could still perfectly fine work with it, just using different methods, that's all.
Streams.
Streams, yes.
We did streams.
Yeah, I was just thinking about those.
Yeah, Lisp, lots of Lisp. Not that you haven't had enough irritating superfluous parentheses yet.
Oh, but I'm starting to get used to them.
That's when the madness starts.
Oh, it was crazy today. He wrote up some C code on the board,
Okay.
and I was
Did you have parentheses instead of
No, he didn't screw up. I was having a hard time sort of following it for the first couple of moments because I was like, wait,
Oh.
no, the notation, it's all right. Hold on, it is right. It's not wrong.
It's got like sequential statements.
Yes.
Probably why no one got the problem.
They're not all doing recursion.
Yeah.
And
I know. He was talking about this one problem which no one got on a midterm because it used recursion, and people thought that in C you really couldn't do that. You had to use all these iterative processes to do it.
They literally thought that recursion was like something just for scheme.
Yeah, exactly.
scheme, by the way, being a dialect of Lisp that's used here in Berkeley.
We know all
MIT.
about dialects.
What?
And MIT.
And MIT, yeah, sorry. Yeah. No, it's possible to do recursion in C. The only problem is that Stack Overflows pretty quick.
Well, you get the right scheme too.
Depending on your compiler, obviously, but Lisp doesn't have Stack Overflows very easily because it's tail.
Well, no.
tail
It depends how you write it.
Or whatever it's called.
No, you can do either.
Yeah, it's true. The usual way
Iterative
is
versus
that
recursive. Yeah, we learned both.
yeah, the usual way is it's compiled. You've got a lot of overhead on each call, whereas the Lisp spec requires that you not. So.
Okay.
And you clean your screen.
I could just take a new one.
Anyway, let's see. So this is in fact the last class. Yay and all that.
Official class, yes.
Yay. I would like to have a get-together meeting thingy sometime before the 20th. That is during finals. So when are your finals over?
Saturday.
17th.
I'm sorry.
Math 1B.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll be gone from this Saturday.
Actually, my
until
finals are
20th
over
in
the
the morning.
20th, actually.
20th?
In the morning.
Okay.
The
What is the 20th? What date?
20th is
Friday.
Friday.
I
It's
technically
last
have a
day.
final that day too, but
Okay.
it's kind of
For what?
doesn't count. It's just a silly skit.
Oh. Okay.
Okay.
Yuri?
What's your final schedule?
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
That help.
One more
Card?
file? It's in there. You won't play with that.
That's true. I don't have it on anywhere else.
What's your final schedule?
I've got 2 finals. I have my Japanese final tomorrow. Well, 3 finals. Last part of my Japanese final tomorrow, and then I have math on Saturday, and I believe it's a Tuesday or something. I have physics. Why?
Okay. So how about we all meet on Friday the 20th then?
What time?
Friday the 20th.
Yeah.
As in like this upcoming Friday.
No, that
Friday
would be
long
the
time away.
15th or something. 13th.
Actually,
Not
the
good?
20th would be bad.
No?
That's after.
Okay.
Wait, that's the last day of finals, right?
Yes.
That's after episode 3. I'll probably still be crazy with it.
Wait, episode 3.
I say that we meet the 18th
Episode
before
3?
episode 3.
Oh, episode
19th.
3. Wait, I just downloaded
Oh,
or
the
something.
Star Wars?
Yes.
Is that coming out sometime?
19th.
Take 20 on it.
Oh.
Ooh, yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
bad.
Bye bye.
Actually, we should all probably just go watch.